Hi there, I'm Chris, an architect based in the UK, and today I'm going to be showing you how to use Rayon's SketchUp plugin. With this plugin, you can instantly transform your 2D architectural drawings from Rayon into 3D models in SketchUp, extruding walls, adding openings, and generating realistic structure in just a few clicks. From there, you can create isometric views, sections, elevations, and much more. When you're finished, you can bring those visuals right back into Rayon and embed them into your drawing set, making your presentation more complete, professional, and informative for clients and stakeholders. Think of the Rayon SketchUp plugin as a bridge between your 2D and 3D workflows, designed to make your process smoother and more efficient. If you'd like to follow along, you can download the free template linked below. And if you'd like a more personalized guide, you can also book a one-to-one demo with the Rayon team using the link in the description. Finally, if you find this tutorial helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more lessons like this one. Now, let's dive in. In this project, I'm working on a residential beach house design for a family. I've already drawn the floor plans, sections, elevations, and created schedules and mood boards and more, all in Rayon. And now I'd like to add a 3D isometric view to strengthen client buy-in and help stakeholders better understand the design. And to do this, we'll jump into SketchUp and install the Rayon plugin. This will allow me to move seamlessly between 2D and 3D, generating isometric views in SketchUp and then bringing them back into the presentation set in Rayon. First things first, let's open the SketchUp warehouse and install Rayon's plugin. So from within SketchUp, we can go to extensions and to the extension warehouse. I'll just close that and then we can search for Rayon. You can see that here, SketchUp for Rayon, free. Very good. Gives you a little bit of information about the plugin, and we can go to install. So we'll take a second to install. The extension has been successfully installed and is now available for your use. Perfect. So once installed, you'll be able to see this little Rayon icon in your extensions. I can click on that. And if it's your first time, you'll have to log in to Rayon to make sure it's looking at your space. But you can see there that has a list of all my templates, all my drawings that I can work with. Now that we've done that, we can import a Rayon floor plan into SketchUp. It will extrude its walls and mark its openings instantly, giving us the perfect 3D representation of our space. Okay, so from this window, I can import my beach house. So you see the little import button down here. We'll click on that. I can select my canvas. So whether it's my model canvas or my millwork canvas, I'll select model. And then I'll determine my wall heights, my door heights, my window heights, and my window sill heights. And these will come in as sort of standard things, but I can adjust those if I wanted to. So let's say my wall height is actually 3 meters. Window sill height, let's say 0.9, for example. And you can decide whether to just import walls, zones, and openings rather than all the CAD information. So we'll go from here and see what happens. So your model is being imported. It might take a few minutes. You can see their model canvas imported successfully. So I can close that, and we can see behind, that's our main space. And it has generated a 3D massing with the assigned openings at the assigned height based on our floor plan. And I can check there, 3000 millimeters, which is 3 meters. So you can see that incredibly helpfully, very, very quickly, it has generated a 3D design for your floor plan that corresponds perfectly with it. Amazing. Now that our floor plan is created in SketchUp, we can strategically decide which views we want to add into our presentation. Let's create a few isometric views and scenes. I'll also show you how you can use the SketchUp plugin to extract sections and elevations and then bring them back into Rayon for further refinement. Okay, with that set up, we can now start creating some views. So I want to create 2 isometric views, but first of all, let's just get the drawing looking exactly how we want it. So I'm going to turn off the guides and I'm going to turn off the axes, and I can go into the layers over here and I can look at my Rayon import, and anything that has this little window symbol is basically CAD information, which I can turn off if I wanted to, and anything that has that solid square is model information basically. So by doing this, it just helps me clean up that drawing. Perfect. So then I can go to camera, make sure I'm set on parallel projection. That will allow you to do those lovely isometric views. Go to ISO. Let's just hide our little man here. Set that up like there, and then I can create a new scene like that. We'll call that isometric 1. Perfect. And then I'll do another one from the other direction. Again, go to camera, ISO. That will set that. And again, I'll save that as a new scene. Call it isometric 2. I just want to show you 2 other elements to this. So one is creating a flat on section. So within SketchUp, you have a section plane tool, which is here. And I can click on that and I can create a section that I can drag throughout the building. So let's say we go through this first window bit here, or maybe that one's good. And if I right click on that plane, I can align the view to create that flat on section. And I can hide my section plane. So that creates my flat on section, and I can save that as another view, for example. And I can also create a sort of perspective section if I wanted to. And then this time I'm going to change it to perspective, and that gives it a bit more of a dynamic, spatial context to it. So say, for example, I wanted to be able to look into the spaces as part of my presentation. Or maybe I'll make it a 2-point perspective, so the verticals are nice and vertical. Yeah, that looks good. So again, I can call that maybe sectional perspective. So I've got 4 different views that I've been able to set up in SketchUp. And you can see how quickly that was. Now we're ready to take these scenes back into Rayon and develop them as part of our presentation. So with those views set up, we can now take them back into Rayon. So we'll go back to the Rayon window, the import export window. That will load up for a second, and we can click on the export. So in the top right hand corner, you can see the scenes. So this will correspond with the scenes that you've set up in SketchUp. So I'm going to export all of those scenes. I'm not going to export textures. I'll press export. Again, that will take a second. Rayon model created successfully, and now I'm jumping back into my browser in Rayon. And you'll see there we've got that perspective section, we've got our isometric views 1, 2, and then we've got our section view. And let's just double check the scale. Perfect, and that's come in to scale. And now the fun begins. The scenes we import from SketchUp tend to look quite basic, but that's exactly where Rayon can be a game changer. We can now fine-tune stroke widths, apply colors, textures and hatches, add annotations, and upgrade that isometric view to a stunning representation of our project. Let's get started. Okay, so I want to show you a few examples of how we can develop these illustrations to go alongside our plan sets and the rest of our information. One thing is to obviously add color to these. We'll refine the line work, and we can also add some annotations and different notations, and maybe some examples of sort of look and feel elements as well. So one thing I'll start with is thinking about the section cuts. So the really helpful tool in there is the bucket tool, which is in the editing, for example. So we could set this to a solid black color, for example, and that, very quickly starts to show where the cut lines are. So it's very legible. Obviously with the bucket tool, it's reading those spaces which are bounded by these continuous lines. And I could save that as a style. And I could call it section fill, for example. And with that set up, I can just use exactly the same tool to do this one. So how quick is that? Similarly, if we were looking back at this sectional perspective, I'll just bring the scale down slightly so it's similar size to the rest. I could say, again, having that consistency, my cut lines here are solid black as well. The other interesting thing is that because of the way the Rayon exporter is modeled, it's not reading a ceiling because it's just extruding the walls. So we could add that as a polyline, for example. So I could just add that here, follow those diagonal lines down, and then do exactly the same thing and fill that. So then, you know, I've got a floor and I've got, in a second, a ceiling. And then I can obviously just adjust these perspective lines as well. There we go. So now it feels like you're looking into that space, almost like a little doll's house. And then exactly the same thing, you know, with the section. You know, we could either use the section, for example, I could lock it. So I could put it on a new layer and say reference section, for example, and I could overlay these with actual Rayon walls. We could set these at 0.3, make them black, and this basically becomes our guideline for our section, you know, very quickly, rather than having to project all those lines up. Like I've illustrated previously, I can use the 3D model exporter to do all the hard work, you know, itself. Yeah, and again, very quickly, we've got a basic section which is starting to have some life to it. The really great thing is being able to set up styles, and then I can use them consistently across the different types of drawings. So again, let's think about maybe some different colors or different materials we want to be illustrating on the interior. So maybe I'll just do a couple of circles here, and we'll set 3 different tones that we want to use. So for example, maybe we say there's this sort of green color here, and I'll say this one is a 60% and this one is a 30%, and I could save this as dark green as a style, similarly mid green as a style, and then light green as a style, and then those are consistent. And then I go to my bucket tool and I could pick a style, and I've got these 3 here, and it almost acts as a little color palette. And then what I tend to do for these types of visualizations, for example, is to set a darker color on one plane. So, you know, I know everything on this sort of left-hand side is this darker tone, and it's got the sort of contrast to it. So then all of our reveals are in this darker tone, for example. And same on this one. With our next color, we can do pick a style. I'll go to the mid green. Say the other walls are that lighter color. Again, it's about creating that sort of contrast. And as you go, you'll start to notice areas that you might have missed. But as long as you've got those styles set up, it's very, very easy. And even, for example, if I've chosen the wrong one there, for example, I can just swatch onto the right one and it'll automatically update. And then lastly, I can use the lighter color. So again, pick a style and I'll put that on these horizontal surfaces. Yeah, and as we said before, we could use it completely within our other types of drawings as well. So you can see there very quickly, we've got much more compelling and illustrative images. And what if I wanted to change those to textures? So I've set them as styles. I can go back in and adjust them. So let's go back into the light green style and say, actually, this wanted to be a texture. So I could go to texture, for example, maybe a timber texture, for example. You can see there, just by changing the pattern, it's automatically updated in all cases. So you can see there, see there, see here. So very quick, very easy. Another couple of things which may help your illustration style would be to look at the line weights and some shadows, for example. So one thing I tend to do, for example, is to make this outer line slightly thicker. It helps read on the page. So I can go into here, for example, select the lines that I want, and then give them more of a thickness. So let's say 0.5, for example. And you'll see there, it's got more of a defined edge. Or I can, delete lines, for example, where the walls haven't quite joined correctly. And I could even change that line style and say outline, for example. Save that as a style in itself. So if I need to come back to it, I know if I change that line weight, it will change both of those things. Similarly, we could use a shadow, for example. So that could just be a polyline space that really is acting as a fill. We can give that a fill, knock it back, and I can turn off that outline, maybe slightly lighter, 10%. And then that just helps kind of lift it off the page. And again, if I save that as a style, so save style, I'll call that shadow. So then when I go to do one on the next image, I can do exactly the same thing again, polyline. And obviously for the purposes of this, I'm doing everything quite roughly. You can be a bit more precise, and I can do pick a style, pick that one. There you go, quick as. And if you wanted to with shadows, you could even start playing with them, yourself a bit more stylistically, and start thinking about the light coming into the side of this space, for example. So we could say, maybe there are some shadows being cast, by this opening. It'd be quite fun. That overlays with the elements that we've already got, just like that. And again, because we've set it up as a style, if I wanted to change the transparency, for example, I can go in there, I can edit the style, and I can say actually, 15% is better. And that will automatically update everywhere that I've used that style. So we could start thinking about how to really communicate the intent behind some of these spaces. So let's take one of the isometric views and see if we can work it up a bit more. So let's say, for example, we want to indicate 3 main spaces. So the living room, the kitchen, and the bedrooms, for example. So we could add some text notes to say what the space is. Obviously with the text, we can, again, set it exactly what we want. We can change the font. We can set that as a style, so title, for example, and we could add a line. We can adjust those as well, so I could make them dashed. That's great. And again, I can save that as a style, so annotation, line, for example, and then I can just make sure these two. And other than the key spaces, for example, maybe we want to create a legend. So I'll call it a legend over here. And I'll just create a new type of style of text and call that sub heading. Make that slightly smaller. I'll say living, dining, terrace, garage, and then we can have a B, C, D, E, F, G. Maybe we've got some little circles. And as long as that's got a nice white fill on, arrange, center back, I've got my own little label. So that codes the drawing, and obviously we can use that code on the plans, we can use that on the sections as well. And now we can start thinking about more elements of look and feel, for example. So what I can do is import some images. So I've just got a few different things saved on my desktop as an example. We can import JPEGs, PNGs, different files like that. And I could start to put together a bit of a mood board on the same page. Let's say for the living space, you've got this vivid blue sofa, since we're by the sea, and this beautiful example of a very nice kitchen here, which incorporates timber in that same colour. And even, maybe we've got a few seashells here and there. One really useful element is be able to edit the images. So we can go into here, I could change the color, change the contrast, exposure, things like that, but I can also remove the background. So Rayon has some AI elements incorporated into it. And there we go. So we've removed the background, and then that will start to, layer up our images, our mood board ideas, just like that. We can do exactly the same thing with the sofa, for example. So again, edit image, remove background. It takes a second. There we go. Now we can start to think, actually, it'd be good to reference the floor. Having an element of the floor over here. You can layer these up as well, so you can bring them to the front and to the back. And you might get to this point and say, oh, actually, maybe green wasn't the right color for my images and maybe it should be more blue because I'm playing on that theme. So I can go back into the style as long as I've got those styles still connected. I could choose a blue color, exactly the same with this one, just like that. And then you can see that those other views have all updated as well. Okay, and now we can start thinking about the sheet setup. So why don't we bring in this other perspective view to sit in the corner of the sheet? I think it'd be quite nice. Hopefully this illustrates so clearly that you can very quickly give a much better understanding to your 2D information with these sort of 3D elements. So we can now create a sheet. So we can do that. We're currently in the model canvas and we're going to go into the paper canvas. I'll create a page. I can set that as an A3 like that. I'm going to go to blocks and I'm going to search for title sheet. Let's go with this one. Scale that down. Perfect. And then I will close that and I will go to layers, and now I want to import the view. So that's looking back at the model canvas. So I'll go to view and then view from model canvas, and then you'll see that appear. So I can scale that, and obviously, when I'm thinking about these drawings, it's less about scale, it's more about, what I'm trying to convey. And so if I find a sort of scale that I'm happy with, I can then Command Shift and bring out the crop boundary to make sure everything's sitting nicely on the page. And obviously with that, I can adjust the title sheet. I can set it up as I want. I can also set a standard title sheet. So I can use the existing title sheets in Rayon. I can adapt them as I see fit. I could make my own standard logos, my own standard title sheets, or I could draw my own and set them as a standard and then share them amongst my colleagues. That's it. Our documentation set is now complete and offers the best of both worlds: 2D documentation and 3D visualization. So all the stakeholders can have comprehensive understanding of the project and the space. Now let's look at how we can share our model online with others to add comments and annotations, to collect feedback directly on the canvas, followed by that final export and share. Before sending this to the client, maybe I want to send this to a colleague to review it, so I could share this document with them. Under share, there is access. So currently that's me, the owner, and I can invite somebody else with their email address. So let's send it to myself, and I could set that as a viewer rather than editor. Editor means that they can edit it. Viewer just means that they can review it and provide comment on it. And if I send invite, that then sends an email to that person. And now over in my emails, I can see this invite link. I'll open it with a different browser, so it's not on my same account. And then I could create a free account under that email address. So I can see here in my other account, I'll look to models that have been shared with me, and then I can see that page, and you can see it's a read only. And under here, we've got our model space, which is here and here. Obviously I can see all those elements. I can measure, I can check meterage as well. So if I wanted to, I could measure the section, for example. But I can also add comments. So for example, I could add a comment here and say, not sure about herringbone floor, maybe something simpler, for example. Or I could add a notation under the pen tool and say, oh, actually, this area, for example, is an external area, so we want to show it differently. So I can add that comment saying this is external, potentially use timber decking or paving. So obviously you can see how quickly you could get your colleagues' comments onto those drawings and then pick them up. And now, having jumped back into other me, I can go back to my model canvas and I can see on the side here comments, and there are these comments on the side, and if I click on them, it opens a little window, shows what it's referring to, and then what the comment is. I can add a reaction, so you've got a series of emojis, or I can, add a text reply. Okay, no problem. We'll send back some samples, and on this one, agreed with client, this will be timber decking. We'll update image. So all very easy, all very seamless. We're not having to export PDFs, send them back, send over emails, get very confused. It's all within the tool. It also keeps a log of those comments, so the back and forth between them, so you can keep an understanding of who said what when. And then finally, say we've amended those comments, we can go back to our paper space, our final sheet, and just like we did with the review copy, we can provide a presentation copy. So that's our final presentation to maybe the client or the council. And I can go to presentation. And again, rather than having to export PDFs or, provide downloads, we can do a presentation as a link. So I'll just click on this and it will give me a link to the presentation. And I can open that and there you go. Lovely refined presentation. I can make that full screen. I can zoom in, all of my line weights are looking good, my text is looking good, spot on. Thanks for watching. I hope this tutorial gave you a clear overview of how to use Rayon SketchUp plugin to bring your 2D drawings into 3D, and then back into Rayon for a complete professional presentation set. Remember, this plugin is all about bridging 2D and 3D workflows, making it easier to communicate your design and get client stakeholder buy-in. If you'd like to keep practicing, don't forget to grab the free template linked below, and if you'd like more tailored guidance, you can always book a one-to-one demo with the Rayon team. The link's in the description. And finally, if you found this video helpful, make sure to like, comment and subscribe so you don't miss future tutorials. I'll see you in the next one.